Mr. Nilekani, many years ago you were credited with telling the world that the world is going to be flat, in a way that the rise of Infosys and the rise of Bengaluru as an infotech capital was seen to represent this idea of a globalizing world. But in Corona times it appears that the world is not flat anymore. Countries seem to be increasingly, dare I say, deglobalizing. United States has decided they will not give H-1B visas, for example, till the end of the year because they want to keep jobs for Americans. Does that trouble you? Are we entering an era of hyper-nationalism and deglobalization?
Well, the book The World is Flat was written by the New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman in 2004. So this was at the height of the globalization. If you remember, around 2000, China joined the WTO. You had the rise of containerization. So both services and products were getting heavily globalized. China became the sort of manufacturing hub for the world. So we had a period of maybe 20 years of a lot of globalization. But now you're right, there is some kind of pushback against that, and countries are, and the politicians elected in those countries are looking at what it means. So certainly the momentum of globalization that was there during the time that Tom Friedman wrote the book, that certainly is much less. But the fact is that we do have a world where supply chains are completely integrated, money flows around the world. People is a bigger challenge because countries don't want to allow people to come in. Services are delivered over a wire. So still, there's a lot of the globalization that has happened. But in the future, I think the trend seems to be countries are a lot more sort of sensitive to how do they deal with globalization, and how do they look at the interests of their own people, and whether there's a difference between that.
But Mr. Nilekani, as the non-executive chairperson of Infosys, are you disappointed with, for example, what the Trump administration is doing, suspending the issuance of H-1B1 visas till the end of the year? Does that amount to a setback for the IT sector in particular?
Well, I think the Indian IT industry has actually been aware of this situation. I mean, at Infosys, 10,000 employees have been hired locally in America. We are one of the biggest new employers in America. We have 6 innovation hubs. So, it doesn't really affect us that much. More than a majority of our people in the US today are not people who are on H1s, they are local hires. So I think firms like Infosys have dealt with this by mitigating the risk. But yes, in general, I believe that a free flow of talent is important, and so I do hope that post the elections, this decision will be reversed.
So let me be very specific with you, Mr. Nilekani. Are you saying that you would like the Trump administration at the very earliest to reverse this decision, as has been suggested by Sundar Pichai, the Google CEO?
Well, certainly it would be good if that happens, but if it happens after the election, that's probably a more practical way of thinking about it. But because if you have noticed, in the last so many decades, usually election year also becomes a visa year.
So you are hopeful that post-elections, the suspension of H-1B visas will be lifted, am I correct?
I certainly hope so, yes.
What we are seeing, Nandan Nilekani, in India as well is creeping protectionism. While there is talk about an Atmanirbhar Bharat, making India a kind of a manufacturing hub, possibly part of global supply chains, taking away business possibly from China. Do you believe that all of this is good to aspire to, but when you raise import duties, when you resort to protectionism, is that really the way forward to become truly competitive, to take on in a way the Chinas of the world with this idea of an Atmanirbhar Bharat? How do you see that?
Well, I think I don't think of self-reliance as protectionism. I do believe that we need to build some industries. For example, I think manufacturing is a good opportunity because people want to diversify from China. And anyway, India is a huge consumer of electronics, phones. So it makes a lot of sense to have them manufactured here. I think, so definitely it's about doing those things. It's about also building tech capability. I mean, the fact that we have invested in Aadhaar and UPI and all these things have actually are examples of self-reliance because they are domestic identity and payment systems which have enabled India to deal with the crisis. So I think we have to do this strategically, but I do believe that, I mean, in pharmaceuticals, we may have to do more of our own APIs and so on. So I think while it's not protectionism so much as making yourself more resilient so that in the wake of a global crisis or in the wake of a global sort of antibiotic reaction to globalization, we are still able to meet our strategic goals.
But do you really think, Mr. Nilekani, we can take on the Chinese, for example, in mobile technology systems or in low-cost manufacturing? Most of our mobiles that are imported today come in from China. Can we really take on China, compete with them at the moment?
Well, I think we have to do a few more things. We have to have very good infrastructure, good ports, a good labor environment, uninterrupted power, trained people. So there are a number of things we have to do, but I see no reason why India cannot be an alternative manufacturing site. And certainly from a global perspective, there couldn't have been a better time for India to emerge as a global manufacturing option, because people have realized that they have what they call as concentration risk, and they would like to diversify. And India, if it has the right infrastructure, the right approach to business and manufacturing, can certainly be a very viable contender for future growth in manufacturing.
The reason I'm asking you this, Nandan Nilekani, is we are obviously in a security environment at the moment where India and China are in an eyeball-to-eyeball conflict on the border, on the ground, militarily. The government has banned 59 Chinese apps. Do you believe that's the way forward in a way to economically boycott China, or do you believe that we've got to be good enough first to compete with the Chinese and make better products than, let's say, a TikTok, which is among the banned apps? Can we make our own TikTok?
Well, certainly we can build, but I think the challenge here is a little more, because you have to understand the business model of these applications. TikTok, like Facebook and Google, its primary source of revenue is advertising. And last year, globally, ByteDance, which owns TikTok, had $17 billion of revenue with $3 billion of profit, essentially in China and the US. Now, India is not a very big advertising market, as you would know, running a channel, that the total ad spending in India across print, television and digital is maybe about $10 to $12 billion. And the digital spend is about $2 to $3 billion. So most of these products essentially in India don't make money, but they are here for strategic reasons because they want to build a large user base. Like WhatsApp may have 400 million users in India, but I mean, I don't think they make much money from that. So if you create a pure Indian product, they don't have the revenue from other countries to cross-subsidize. So I think it's a little more than a technology issue. It's how do we create an advertising-led product in India which is sustainable.
Nandan Nilekani, let me come back to the big picture at the end. How do you see the economy going forward? Are you a pessimist like some credit rating agencies are suggesting we could be in a recessionary phase, growth rates down to 0%? How do you see the overall business ecosystem now going forward? Give us a one-year horizon.
Well, clearly in the short term it is challenging, and jobs will be an issue. The financial sector challenges, the NPAs of the banks and the NBFCs, and also these are all short-term challenges. But the fundamental strategic advantages of India, a young country in an aging world, a country which has a huge domestic market, a country which has is a power leader in services today. We have a current account surplus because our invisibles, which is both software as well as remittances by our our expats, makes our current account positive. So we have $400 billion of foreign exchange in the bank. So I think there are lots of benefits, and I think if we plan wisely and strategically, while we will have a year of these challenges, at least till we have good treatments and vaccines, I think if we do it smartly, we can actually come out of this in a much better position.
I just want to ask you also in conclusion, Mr. Nilekani, lots of young entrepreneurs will be watching this, listening to you. What's your advice to them in these tough times, in dealing with a lockdown, in Corona times, where the future seems so uncertain?
Well, I think, many people believe that these are the times when companies are born. I mean, if you look at Google, it was born around 2000 at the time of the dot-com burst. And many of the firms that emerged later came in 2007 and 8 during the global financial crisis. So some people actually believe that even as we're dealing with all this doom and gloom, there's some entrepreneur out there who's thinking of a big idea which is going to be a great success. So I'm confident that there will be some great companies that will emerge from this crisis.
But specifically, if there is any one golden rule that you would have for young entrepreneurs, is it just to be patient? What is that quality that they need in these tough times?
Be patient and innovate. But I think to me, one key learning from all this is that build a very profitable business. When you look at Google, Facebook, Amazon, or ByteDance, or Alibaba, or Tencent, or whoever you want, all of them have built massive profit-making companies, and that's given them the financial sustainability to carry on even in difficult times. So I think it's important that Indian startups learn how to become profitable and generate free cash flow, like the IT companies have shown. I mean, a company like Infosys generates $2 billion of free cash flow every year. So I think the future is going to be tech companies that can also run sustainable businesses that generate profit. And that is something which I would suggest that everybody think about.
Nandan Nilekani, let's hope all the young professionals and entrepreneurs who are watching in will imbibe your mantra. Thank you so much for joining us here on this India Today special.